She slid the tablet across the table like it was a gift, not a loaded weapon. "Sign the mutual separation or you walk with nothing," she said, voice all sugar and threat. The Zoom call hadn't ended, just me and 53 silent tiles watching. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for the pen. I picked the damn thing up, held it up to the camera, and said, soft, steady, like I was reading someone her rights. "Just to confirm, this is a waiver offer, correct? Without legal present?" And for a moment, it was like someone had dropped a glass in church. If you're still here listening, do me one favor. Subscribe and like this video. I know 97% of you won't, but the team behind these stories, they live off that one click. It's free for you, and it keeps the lights on here. All right, back to it. You wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I was the ghost in every exit interview. Not the voice, not the muscle, just the record. The one who sat behind the scenes while everyone else chased headlines or padded performance reviews. I didn't fight for titles. I fought for structure. I built the compliance lattice that kept Virion from crumbling during the 2021 class action audit. My fingerprints were on every policy, every dual auth exit, every waiver language clause. That's why the DOJ let us operate under consent decree instead of suspension. That's why I stayed. But Marla Trent didn't know that. Or didn't care. She blew in like a TED Talk with legs, wearing heels that probably cost more than my mortgage payment and tossing buzzwords like she was getting paid per acronym. Agile HR. Cultural recalibration. Emotional offboarding. You'd think she was hosting a damn daytime show, but under all that polish, not 1 ounce of institutional sense. She started scrapping controls within her first 2 weeks, axed the cross-signer requirement for termination approvals, rolled out digital-only severance acceptances, no witness, no legal review, just a click. Called it efficiency. I called it negligent. 3 times I flagged protocol deviations, once in a policy report, once in a board meeting, once in a direct email to her. 3 times she dismissed me. "This isn't the old Virion," she said, flipping her hair like she was auditioning for a shampoo ad. Maybe it wasn't the old Virion, but the decree still stood. Clause 7.4c was still law, and any attempt to coerce a mutual separation without legal present, still a federal breach. She didn't know that I wrote that clause. And worse, she didn't know it was self-triggering. The system I built had a tripwire, one she couldn't see. A waiver issued under duress on record without legal. That triggered a back-end audit ping, one routed directly to the Department of Labor and our external counsel. Not because I wanted to fight, because I built the machine to survive people like her. So when she smiled that boardroom smile and tried to soft threaten me into signing my own silence, I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just held up the device like I was handing the courtroom a murder weapon and let the camera do the rest. 10 minutes later, my Slack lit up like a Christmas tree, a ping from legal, another from IT, a forwarded email with a subject line in all caps. Was this recorded? The answer was obvious. The system had already pulled the footage, time-stamped, annotated, cross-referenced with internal compliance logs. She hadn't just violated policy, she'd wrapped it in a bow and live-streamed it to half the damn company. And me? I just sat back in my chair. I'd done my job. I'd told no lies, I'd touched nothing. The audit ghost had awakened, and all I had to do now was wait. She called them streamlined workflows, like renaming a loaded gun made it safer. No more dual auth signatures, no more mandatory in-person reviews. Just a neat little e-form that HR could send and finalize on their own. No legal present, no witness. No confirmation from the compliance team. I watched her present it in a Zoom breakout with the kind of smug efficiency you only get from someone who's never seen the inside of a courtroom. "This'll save us time and paperwork," she chirped, clicking through her slides like she was unveiling a new logo, not gutting 6 years of protocol. I flagged the violations quietly at first, pulled the logs, highlighted 3 instances where her new process directly contradicted our consent decree with the Department of Labor, sent it up the chain. One response came back. "Appreciate the attention to detail, but this is the new Virion." Right. The new Virion, a place where shortcuts got praise and memories got paved over. But I remembered. I remembered when the DOJ dragged us through the mud for 6 months because someone in middle management decided 1099 looked better on a spreadsheet than full-time. I remembered the lawsuits, the settlements, the fear, and I remembered the clause I wrote because of all that. 7.4c, subsection tumag. Any unapproved modification to termination procedures during active consent oversight shall initiate an automated compliance event log with or without manual submission. I hadn't just built the policy, I'd built the alarm, the digital tripwire buried beneath her shiny forms and pastel dashboards, the kind you can't see until you're already bleeding, so I stopped pushing. No more warnings, no more flags. I let her roll it out. Let her deploy her half-baked exit program like it was gospel. Let her call meetings with C-levels and call me over-attached to legacy procedures. Fine. Legacy it is. But unlike her, my legacy had teeth. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to stay quiet long enough for her to step into the trap she was too arrogant to notice. One by one, the departures started. 2 terminations in finance. 1 voluntary resignation in customer ops that looked more like a forced mutual. No legal oversight, no compliance review. Just that damn tablet and an overeager HR associate in every Zoom box acting like a severance clause was a pizza delivery. And every time she hit approve, my system took note. Not just the action, but the absence. No cosigner, no legal doc chain, no acknowledgement receipt from compliance. Absence has a signature too. And the system I built? It records silence, just as clearly as sound. What she didn't realize was that by erasing the checklist, she didn't erase the record. She just made it more obvious. Every missing approval stood out like a broken rung on a ladder. Every bypassed audit route lit up like a flare in the dark. She thought she was cleaning house, but all she was doing was leaving fingerprints on every wall as she went. I became a shadow in my own system, watching, logging, letting the breach pile up in silence. Not because I wanted vengeance, because I wanted the truth to land like a file drop. Slow at first, then undeniable. I didn't have to raise a red flag. I just had to wait for the weight of her own shortcuts to tip the scale. The irony was, she believed she was in control, believed that by deleting the checklist, she deleted the oversight. But oversight wasn't a document. It was me, and I had no intention of warning her again. She waited until the last slide ended and the fake applause died out, the kind where everyone claps because they think they should, not because anything mattered. Then came the ping. Please stay after the call. No explanation, just a ping from Marla with a little waving hand emoji, like this was casual. Routine. But nothing with Marla ever was. The moment the others began dropping off the Zoom, her voice cut in, bright and brittle. "Let's do a quick sync," she said, like we were checking in on lunch orders instead of walking into a firing squad. "We've reviewed your role and determined a realignment is in order." Her words landed like pre-scripted bullets. "We're offering a mutual separation. Sign and we'll part ways clean. Don't sign, well, there won't be anything on the table next week." Then she slid it across the tablet. It made the smallest tap on the wood, like a starter pistol with a silencer. HR was already seated beside her, like she'd been waiting backstage. Legal? Nowhere in sight. Just me, a muted mic, and a camera light still glowing red. She thought I wouldn't notice, thought I'd be too flustered or humiliated to speak, that I'd sign, that I'd disappear. Instead, I turned the tablet toward the screen, let the lens drink in the offer like a documentarian catching the perfect frame. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I just looked straight at my own reflection in that little corner box and said, "Just to confirm for the record, this is a waiver offer without legal present. Is that correct?" The room didn't go quiet. It was already quiet, but something shifted. There were still 53 people in that meeting. Not everyone had logged off. Some forgot, some lingered, some, like our outside counsel, always kept one tab open just in case. And now every one of them was watching Marla blink too fast, smile too tight, eyes darting just slightly off camera like she was looking for an escape hatch that didn't exist. She leaned forward and reached to mute me. Too late. The words had already been said. The offer had already been shown. I didn't touch the screen. Didn't sign. I just folded my hands in my lap like I was at a Sunday sermon waiting for someone to confess. Marla tried to pivot, of course. "This is a friendly discussion," she said, tone wobbling under the weight of rehearsed confidence. Nothing formal, just options. But the screen didn't care. The timestamp didn't lie. Neither did the absence of legal presence, nor the live audience. The HR lead beside her looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. She started whispering, forgetting her mic was on. "Was this supposed to be on Zoom?" she murmured, barely audible but enough. Enough for the log, enough for the footage, enough for the compliance algorithm I built to flag real-time coercion events under our 3-year consent decree. Because see, this wasn't just any waiver. This was the exact scenario the federal oversight team warned about. A termination with no legal counsel. A mutual separation pushed live. A thinly veiled threat masked as a choice, and all of it. Captured, archived, annotated. The algorithm had already fired a ping to our legal backups and external audit log. Marla didn't just trigger a process. She filmed the crime and distributed copies. I didn't gloat. That's not my nature. I just sat there, hands still, voice calm, eyes forward. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about record keeping. And the moment she slid that tablet across the table like she was doing me a favor, she gave me exactly what I needed. Proof. She thought she was ending something. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that she'd just opened the next phase of the compliance cycle. One I wrote, one I owned, one that didn't need my permission to begin. All I had to do was sit still and let the machine run. And it had already started. Marla's first email came in at 9:13 a.m., just a polite flag from IT that a compliance protocol had been triggered. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. She skimmed it. Didn't even blink. Probably thought it was just some system hiccup from the Zoom integration. The second email came 3 minutes later. Subject line, escalated flag, consent decree trigger. She was still mid-smile, mid-control, mid-whatever she thought this was when the ping from legal hit her inbox like a thunderclap. I could see it on her face. Not confusion, not yet, but that flicker of disconnect. Like someone reading their own name in an obituary and wondering if it was a typo. I stayed still, didn't speak, didn't move. Just watched the color drain slowly from her face while she tried to keep that overtrained, PR-approved smile from sliding off. The HR lead next to her looked from Marla to me, then back to the screen, like she'd just realized she was standing in the middle of a frozen lake and heard the first crack. See, what Marla didn't know, or refused to learn, was that the 2021 consent decree wasn't just a symbolic slap on the wrist. It was a living, breathing framework I helped engineer after our company got torched for misclassification and retaliation claims. Clause 7.4c was my clause, my language, my signature, and it outlined specifically that any waiver process initiated without legal presence, especially when recorded, constituted presumptive coercion. The decree didn't require an investigation to log the violation. The system was the witness. That clause was linked to our live call software. So when Marla slid that tablet across the desk and issued an ultimatum on camera, the AI audit layer flagged it immediately. Timestamp. Participant count. Legal status. No signatory confirmation from counsel. Match found. Compliance ping fired. And that ping went to our external legal team, our internal audit office, and most importantly, the Department of Labor liaison still assigned to us through Q4. It wasn't personal. It was protocol. I hadn't spoken in over 10 minutes by the time Marla's Slack pinged again. Her mouse was moving, trying to find some off-ramp in the call, but she couldn't leave. Because if she left, the optics got worse. If she stayed, the silence became unbearable. I watched her try to multitask, to keep her eyes on the screen while panic bloomed behind them. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, froze, didn't pick up. That one wasn't internal. It was a number she didn't recognize. The outside counsel we retained during the 2021 crisis didn't bother sending emails when it mattered. They called. The kind of call you answer in a bathroom stall with a pen and notepad, whispering like you're hiding from a sniper. She ignored it. I knew what she was hoping, that the alert was an overreaction, that it could be walked back, explained away. But protocol doesn't care about tone. It doesn't care if you meant well. It doesn't care if you smile when you break it. I remember building that safeguard after our last audit. They'd missed it the first time. Someone in HR offering a conditional severance off record, claiming it was just a conversation. That cost us $600,000 in penalties. I vowed we'd never be that sloppy again. So I wrote it myself. A digital tripwire buried in the workflow chain. It waited. Quiet. invisible, until someone like Marla walked in thinking they were too clever, too pretty, too modern for policy. And when they triggered it, it wasn't a pop-up. It was a log, immutable, archived, and already in the hands of regulators before anyone could say mutual separation. By the time she looked back up at me, that smile was gone. She didn't ask me anything, didn't accuse, didn't threaten, because even in her panic, she could feel it. The air had changed. She hadn't fired me. She hadn't controlled the narrative. She hadn't streamlined anything. She'd walked into a protocol designed to document abuse in real time. And now she was the case study. The call came in at 11:26 a.m. Not from HR, not from IT, not even from my own department. It was Elaine Mercer, our external counsel, the same woman who sat beside me during the 2021 hearings when Virion nearly got carved apart for labor violations. She didn't waste time. Was that a live call? No greeting, no preamble, just the question. I answered just as bluntly. Fully recorded. 53 participants still present. Time codes in the audit log. She didn't say, "Oh God," or "Okay." Just one low exhale and then, "Understood." Then she hung up. Within the hour, things started cracking. I watched it unfold in real time, like a controlled demolition of a building no one knew was condemned. Legal pulled the plug on 3 terminations in progress. Not paused, frozen. Mid-packet, mid-signature. I knew the names. All mutual separations Marla had pushed through in her new system, with no legal witness, no compliance cross-check, no record of actual consent. Every one of those files was now under formal review. The logs I'd built weren't flashy. They didn't send alerts or pop-ups. They weren't meant to be seen. They were meant to exist. Quietly, thoroughly, like a spider web in the dark. Each time Marla's system bypassed the dual auth, each time she slid a tablet across a desk with no legal sign-off, the log tracked it, time-stamped it, packaged it for an automated compliance chain. That chain didn't just stop at internal audit. It reached Elaine's team and the Department of Labor. So when the email hit my inbox at 2:13 p.m., I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Subject: Voluntary Waiver Audit Request. Urgent from DAL Liaison Compliance, apost.gov. Redacted. CC Legal Team, vironlegal.com. There it was. The machine had moved on its own. I didn't gloat. Didn't forward it to anyone. I just filed it under the internal tag I'd created years ago. Clause 7.4c, live trigger. It hadn't been used until now, but it worked exactly as intended. By 3 p.m., our in-house legal team had taken full control of HR's separation protocols. Marla's system access was quietly restricted. Workflow, freeze pending full compliance review, the notice read. Soft words, nuclear implications. She still didn't understand the scale of what she'd done. She thought she'd broken a rule. What she broke was the rule book, and the rule book was watching. That's the thing about institutional memory. It doesn't care who's in charge. It doesn't care how new your slides look or how fresh your branding is. It only cares about the lines we etched in blood the last time someone like her thought paperwork was optional. And I had kept those lines sharp, intact, and buried just deep enough to remain invisible until the right pressure brought them back to the surface. They had. Elaine called again later that afternoon, not to ask more questions, just to confirm I wouldn't be touching anything. "Let the process unfold," she said. "We'll handle it from here." I agreed. I didn't need revenge. I had regulation, and regulation had teeth. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I'd won anything, but because the machine I built hadn't forgotten what mattered. Marla had tried to erase the checklist, but the checklist remembered her. They didn't say her name out loud, not once. That was how I knew it was serious. The Thursday board review was quiet, clinical, not a single pressing concern in the prep doc. No dramatic PowerPoint, just a locked agenda, an unscheduled audit slot, and a noticeable absence from the HR block that usually belonged to Marla. The board secretary didn't even offer coffee. That's how you know the temperatures dropped below polite. But I saw the stack of reports in front of them, printouts, actual paper, and I knew what they were holding. The system-generated logs I'd built weren't pretty, but they were exact. Each report ran like a cardiac monitor, timestamp, initiator ID, legal percent. No. Compliance witness, none. Recording status, active. Waiver status, coerced interaction flagged. They weren't looking at mistakes. They were looking at a pattern. A forensic team had been looped in by Wednesday night. Not just legal, not just compliance. External forensic auditors. The kind you don't call unless you suspect a mess big enough to stain the floorboards. They asked for backdated waiver trails, termination approval paths, and internal HR comms going back 6 months. The moment I handed them access credentials to the system, the lead investigator nodded once and said, "So this is the ghost log?" I didn't correct him. That's what they called it during the 2021 consent rebuild, the ghost log, the invisible layer that tracked absence instead of presence. Not what was done, but what was skipped. Skipped co-signatures, skipped witnesses, skipped timestamps, like a shadow catching the outline of things that didn't belong. And Marla had left plenty of shadows. She thought by accelerating exits she was increasing efficiency, but with every shortcut, every friendly offer, every unlogged separation, she added more to the audit queue. The system was never punitive. It didn't judge. It just weighed, and the weight had finally tipped. What stunned me most was not the audit itself, but the chairman's silence. He wasn't a loud man to begin with, but he always opened reviews with a few words, an update, a comment, a sideways joke. Not this time. He entered the room with his notes already closed, spent the first 10 minutes listening, not speaking. As the compliance team laid out the breaches, he didn't interrupt. Just sat there with his thumb resting on his chin and his other hand flat on the binder. And when the report reached the last page, 28 entries of violations, each one traceable to a unique HR ID and verified by recording timestamps. He closed the folder, looked around the table and said, "We won't need to vote. Initiate protocol review immediately. Remove access pending outcome." Not Marla's name, just the facts. That's how real power operates. No yelling, no spectacle, just precise elimination. Later, someone in the executive group chat asked why there hadn't been a public announcement. One of the VPs replied, "Because some departures aren't loud, they're surgical." Another replied with a single link to the updated compliance handbook. Page 12, clause 7.4c, highlighted. It had my initials at the bottom. I didn't reply. That's the thing about building systems to survive leadership turnover. They don't care who's holding the steering wheel. The protocol I wrote didn't ask if the person violating policy was trendy, polished, or popular. It didn't care if the board liked her. It only cared about structure. And when the structure was tested, it held. Not because I fought, because I had positioned truth where it could speak for itself. She tried to bypass the audit trail. The audit trail made her the subject. The subject line was sterile. Updated separation terms, please review. But the sender wasn't HR this time. It was Meredith Crane, General Counsel. Her tone wasn't cheerful or dismissive. It was respectful, calculated. The kind of language that only appears when the stakes have changed and someone finally read the rulebook they'd been using as a coaster. The email began with one sentence. "We acknowledge the prior attempt was not in accordance with policy." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just enough language to signal that someone, maybe the chairman, maybe external counsel, had connected the dots between Marla's stunt and the chain of liability it activated. Attached was a new package. It had all the trappings of professionalism, a cleanly formatted severance agreement, a mutual NDA, and a full liability release, standard boilerplate. But what caught my eye was the final paragraph on page 3, a new clause inserted at my request via counsel. Remediation fee for consent decree violation, 2.4 million, payable directly to Department of Labor as outlined under Federal Compliance Reconciliation. That wasn't for me. That was for the system, for the rule she broke, for the oversight body we'd been answering to since the last time someone in HR thought paperwork was optional and accountability was negotiable. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about finality. Quiet, legal, exact. I forwarded the draft to my attorney. She skimmed it in less than 10 minutes and called me. "They're not trying to be clever anymore," she said. "They're trying to finish this before the regulators dig deeper." I agreed. We made one small amendment to the NDA, tightened the language around compliance systems IP, just to ensure the audit framework I'd built couldn't be repackaged or reassigned without triggering another review. Not because I needed to keep control, because I needed to make sure whoever came after me couldn't be erased by another Marla with good teeth and no discipline. I signed the documents the following Monday, but I didn't rush. I let the weekend pass. Let the pressure build in their legal department. Let the delay remind them that I wasn't waiting by my inbox anymore. The payment to the Department of Labor posted midweek. Not a word was said about it in the all-company email. Just a quiet notation in the quarterly disclosures. Remediation payment submitted in relation to federal consent oversight. No names, no context, just a figure, but the auditors would know. And so would anyone who bothered to ask why a company like Verion suddenly decided to write a check that size to the government with no lawsuit on file. I didn't get a plaque. No send-off, no exit interview, just a secure document transfer, a closing signature, and silence, which was exactly what I wanted. Because closure isn't about noise. It's about leverage respected, policy honored, and a door that closes without slamming. They got their exit. I got mine. But the system? It got stronger. The slide deck looked the same corporate blue, same mission statement recycled for the 5th time, same brittle enthusiasm from the comms team trying to sound upbeat about flat metrics. But something had shifted. It was subtle, like when a picture frame is slightly tilted and no one says anything, but everyone notices. The HR segment was buried halfway down the agenda, tucked between supply chain updates and IT security metrics. It lasted exactly 6 minutes. The speaker, a clean-cut man I'd never seen before, introduced himself as supporting HR transition efforts in an advisory capacity. Legal, not HR. He didn't mention Marla, didn't nod to her absence, just listed a few policy refinement initiatives and moved on. I stayed muted, camera off, just another square on the participant list. No one called on me. No one had to. My fingerprints were already there, on the language, the structure, the process diagrams tucked behind every updated slide. They weren't even subtle about it. Midway through the meeting, the HR handbook was re-uploaded to the internal portal, version 12.3. The file name had today's date. I opened it. Scanned the index. Section 9, Exit Procedures. Section 9.4, Dual Authorization Requirement. Section 9.4.2, Consent Decree Coercion Safeguard. My clause. Intact. Expanded. Someone in the Zoom chat finally said what everyone was thinking. What happened to Marla? There was a beat of silence, then another line appeared. Check the handbook. That was it. No explanation, no farewell message, no thanks for your service. She hadn't just been removed. She'd been erased, like she was a formatting error that got corrected in a patch update. A few of the younger staffers tried to ask more, but legal locked the chat 15 seconds later. Let's keep discussion focused on agenda topics, the moderator wrote. And that was that. No one said my name either. They didn't need to. My name wasn't on the screen, it was in the policy, on every page of that handbook they uploaded. The margins didn't say written by, but the language did. Every line carried the structure I built. Every clause bore the imprint of someone who remembered what happens when HR thinks it's bigger than the law. When the meeting ended, I didn't log off right away. I just sat there watching the participant list trickle down, all those glowing squares going dark. Somewhere in there, someone would notice that the real power in a company isn't who speaks the loudest in the call. It's who decides what gets uploaded to the handbook. Marla had wanted the spotlight. She got it, briefly, and then it shut off. Me, I wanted the system to work. And now it did. I left Verion not with a box of my things or a staged goodbye in the break room, but with a handshake in a windowless room and a signed consultancy agreement under a new letterhead. Mine. There was no drama, no exit interview, no best of luck in your next adventure email thread. Just a quiet understanding between me and the chairman. The system had worked, and now it was time to build the next one. They brought me on as a compliance transition architect, not in name. Titles are for people who want to be seen. I was there to rewrite the bones, to make sure what happened with Marla never happened again. What they wanted was simple. A system that made coercion impossible to bury. One that didn't depend on intent or tone, but on verified actions, digital trails, and recorded proof. I agreed. on one condition. I'd build it under my LLC. No internal strings, no HR access, no PR dilution. The audit framework would belong to the company, but the architecture, the real fail-safes, would live with me. The first line in the new policy draft was mine. Any termination event must not occur on an unrecorded channel. Full stop. No wiggle room. If it's not logged, it's not legal. No Zoom, no call, no signed acknowledgement from legal, no paperwork. The system didn't wait for human error. It preempted it. And if someone tried to sidestep it, a flag fired to legal, to audit, and, if needed, to our federal oversight contacts. But the part they always come back to, the moment that stuck, the one no one talks about but everyone remembers, was the clip. That footage. The day Marla slid the tablet across the desk, smiling like she was in control, while I held it up to the camera and said exactly what needed to be said. It's still archived, still time-stamped, still used in monthly compliance training, a silent warning with no narration. They play it once a month during internal review sessions. They don't announce it, don't frame it as disciplinary. They just load it in. Play the moment. Let the silence do the work. It's not there to punish. It's there to remind them that systems remember when people forget. That clip, those 34 seconds, became institutional memory. Not a story, not gossip, proof. That's what matters. Not the drama, not the fallout, but the ability to show, without debate, exactly where someone crossed the line. The legacy I left behind wasn't a program or a handbook. It was a mirror built into the machine, so that every time someone thinks about rushing a termination, skipping a witness, silencing a voice, they see themselves reflected in that footage. One camera, always on. That was the real protection. Not me, and not even policy. Just the quiet knowledge that next time they try to erase the checklist might be watching.